that experience where it's like, oh, I'm going to play this character, whether it be for a day, whether it be for years, right? You learn, and it just sort of like you're taking things in. But I wanted you to just talk more about that because it seems it's a big part of your work.
Yeah. I think our work is inherently a large part of our just education, just as spirits. And so acting, storytelling feels like the fast lane in the evolutionary space, spiritually. You can evolve as an accountant, or you can drive a trash truck or run a donut shop, name it. But the arts, but specifically acting, is the fast lane on sort of this evolutionary spiritual path, education that we are in. As spirits having a physical experience, each character that you have to receive without judgment, right? That's like the challenge, to be the number one advocate for that character. In order to not be in judgment of that character and to sit in a space where you are being and reacting in a space, you have to turn your empathy barometer on high. And so in doing that and trying to fill those shoes, fill the mold of this character, you're gonna have to connect a lot of dots. And you're connecting dots on the day, you're prepping, connecting dots before you go into it. But like the vast majority of it, you're finding it in the moment. You're constantly discovering. And so I think for my undiagnosed ADD mind, I think it is sort of the best occupation for me, because there are so many things to focus on, so many things to pull together, so many things to busy yourself with in the healthiest way. And, just to get to spin plates like that and try to get to a place where you feel comfortable in the discomfort of doing that. I'm long-winded, bro. So I just
because what I'm hearing, and I think it's it's super interesting. And so I'm curious about. Stay with me if I get long-winded as well, right? How do you get to a place where, because you are a trained actor, so you've had some of the best training, right? So how do you get to a space that is, because, and I think this is a flaw to our system, is that things are given to us through words on a page, right? And we have to disrupt that to bring it into the living space, into the spiritual space, right? So for you, how do you go from sort of ingesting that information, as like all students do, to now sort of like you're really sort of, you're bringing it into life? And I have an example, right? A friend of mine, John Chafin, I've always been fascinated by, I've noticed that some of my friends, when they have their first kid, their career takes off, right? And I've always been interested in that, because as a community, we tend to sort of like, I got to focus on my career and I got to do this. And then, people will do this thing that you would think take them so far away from that. And then all of a sudden things start operating, which it feels to me, it's sort of like you've been able to sort of, connect to. And John said this brilliant thing, and his career has taken up new momentum after having his kid. And he said it to me the best way anyone has ever said it to me. He said, Desean, by looking at my kid and paying attention to my kid, I have truly learned what presence is. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just sort of like, it feels to me that what you're talking about is sort of like taking these sort of academic things that we may get on a page, but then he learns it in that moment of just like, this is what presence really is. It's the attention, and with the, you know, the desire and the attention I'm placing on my child.
Well, that was good, bro. It's funny that you mentioned a child, because at the early part of when you're asking the question, and you were like, you described it as breaking up what's on the page. I've never thought of it like that, and that's helpful. And that's that part of the process is if you don't get comfortable with that, you'll quit. Because that's you're talking about giving birth, right? You're talking about metabolizing it, right? Like living with it, growing it, and feeding it, and then like pushing it out, right? And I've never heard a woman say that was fun. Never heard it. Never heard it. But she will love that baby more than anybody else in the world. And so, and if you were a prolific childbearer, every one of those children and that every experience would be entirely different. You know, and so I don't know if you could really, like, how much advice can you give? You know, like how it's in you and you're experiencing it that way. And then number 2 is different. And number 3 might be easier, and it might get progressively easier the more you keep having them. Right? But it is not the same as the first one, the second one, the third one, or whatever. And so part of it, I think, is accepting that you can't have the love without the pain. Right? And we want to jump to the love. But like the foundation of the love is the struggle. Right? So therefore the ownership comes from the struggle. And I think we, in our upgrade culture that we live in, like we don't take the time to get to know things. And that is connected to struggle and time and effort, because we just live in we live in an era of convenience, right? And not only convenience, but we're constantly trying to remove discomfort from our lives to the point where it's a habit. Like any discomfort is bad all the time. Like, how can I get rid of this thing easier? How can I solve this problem easier? Everything is about easier, then it devalues what is challenging. And so I'm going to bring it to a close. Since I don't go too far. So to answer the question, or to sort of like explore that thought a little bit about breaking up the language, the work, to own it and digest it, and to share that with people. And your responsibility is to make it look easy. Sometimes we think it's supposed to, like, I got to make this shit look hard. So you know, it's like your responsibility is to make it look easy. That process is where you own the craft. Is where the honor is. It's there. And nobody thanks you for that. Like, no one pats you on the back for that, really, like, because, you know, you're not even talking about having shared it yet, right? You're just to get to where you're up there and sharing it is, there's some pain you have to make friends with.
So an image comes to mind for me because we just started talking about your child.
Yeah.
And an image comes to me, like, I think this is well known that the way that the child will ingest the most from you, right, is through your breathing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, to just like sit there, because that's where meeting you right now today, it's like I think people are responding to you because there's just a place in your body where you are breathing that feels like, okay, there's space for me there, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, we could say whatever to the kid. You can say whatever, but ultimately we're so smart that it's just sort of like, no, I'm taking in what you're breathing in, mm-hmm. right? You guys with me? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's so interesting to me, though, that when we go into characters, and I think this is what I respond to in your work, right? Is, Juan to Don Shirley, just different breathing and different presence. So it feels like whether, I'm talking, some actor, your acting teacher talk, but I see it within your work. It feels like you have an understanding. And for, all of us actors in the room as well, like, why is it that we're so focused on the way we think the line is supposed to be said, rather than if this is my partner or whatever, that the thing that most communicates love is your breath. You know what I'm saying? And it feels like you that lives in your work, that it's you move. It's like you get into their skin. So it would be whatever you say or share with us about your process.
Thank you. So how do you get to where we're channeling, right? I'm not saying I've achieved that, but I'm saying, how do we get there, right? And so I try to work from that place where I would like to, as a goal, be channeling. So when you speak about breath, now, I mean, we could sort of get into space that may be a little uncomfortable, but I want to go there. So I'm not talking religion, I'm talking spirit. So when you think about taking on another life, right? I feel like part of your responsibility is to be articulating for an audience how that spirit is experiencing the world. But they're experiencing it through the capsule of that particular body. And that's what makes it different from you, right? And of course, you could bring yourself to it. But again, that's where you get into being a servant and in service and advocating for another spirit. And so Moonlight was the first character that I actually prayed for, that I literally prayed for. And I spoke to him from the standpoint of, I asked Juan, I was like, what do you want of me? Like, what can I give, and almost like, if I was called on to do this, there must be something that you must see a lot in me, to bring the fullness of you to life, right? You picked me. And so then I got to honor that, right? And be like, okay, so then what do I have to give? You got to think highly of yourself, because that's almost like, again, not to get religious, but you're like, you're speaking on almost like a spiritual plane, like responsibilities with spiritual contracts. Like, you have a contract to tell my story, right? And that story is supposed to be a reflection of real life that is communicating real ideas that impact people's lives, right? Or tell the story of versions of oppression and communities that have been disenfranchised or whatever. Those are the ones who win all the awards, are the ones that are about people who didn't have their day, right? And when I mention awards, I mean it from the standpoint of like the ones we value as being worth our time and attention and recognizing, and the ones that are embedded in the culture in a certain way. So the breathing is part of my goal is I believe God is real. I do. I believe God is real. I do. And part of one of the things that I want is for that to be undeniable in my work. Do you know what I'm saying? And so therefore, and again, I would hope that that's not ego. I really do. But I would hope that it becomes like this sort of policy, this approach, a commitment to really work as best as I can to tell the truth on behalf of this character. And so then mentioning all that, when you think about breathing, that's how you're inviting the expression of a different spirit, because you're taking on circumstances different from your own. So therefore, it's kind of like you get to work with the higher power on telling a story and communicating universal spiritual truths, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or what have you, that you are, and that goes back to the fast lane thing, you are in step with all the other well-intended humanitarians on a certain level. And especially the grayer your characters are, the more valuable I think that they are, in a sense, because you begin to articulate and shed light on things that are not easily understood.
Not easily understood, but us as human beings, when we see it in action, right?
You recognize it.
Yeah.
Like a tuning fork. Your emotional, spiritual intelligence recognizes that, that's medicine. Yeah.
And it's so interesting that, I think I'm speaking both as a coach and also as an actor myself, just sort of like that, I really gotta, disrupt that for myself, that again, this powerful thing that I that it's sacred.
Yes.
And so many times just sort of like, why don't we just do that?
Yeah.
Just do that. We get so distracted with these, with the other things that we feel is going to get us the job, and we got to deal with those things as well. But I just love that you're talking about that. Can I take it here? Because I remember when I think it was mid 2000s when I was like, damn, Desean, you just wasted all that money on that degree. I was so down on myself. I was just like, you went to just waste. That's what you did.
Why did you feel that way?
Well, because I at that time, I thought I'm not where I'm at now in the realization of how powerful storytelling is, right? For a while there, I was like, why did I decide to become a storyteller, right? But then I came into recognition, living a little bit longer, right? Just going through life. And I'm like, wow, storytelling is truly like one of the most powerful things that you could do on this planet, right? And within your work, it also makes me think about the True Detective story, to be honest. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. What I know is that at first you were offered a different role and you advocated to be, to get the lead in the show. So I just want, and you used, images of your grandma. It's a fascinating story.
Yeah. So I had been working for about 17 years, 18 years. And I didn't feel more talented in year 18 than I felt I was in year 1. Now, I may have been better, just from time or what have you, but even that, I don't know. I didn't feel more talented. But I felt like I knew what I wanted and I knew why I wanted. And I felt like I had said yes to supporting parts for so long and gotten really good at supporting other people's stories. And for a while, you begin to believe that if I do really great in this David Fincher movie, that will help me get a job in another movie and move up. And what I began to discover around in the 2010s, early 2010s, I just started saying no. And the reason I started saying no was because I felt like every time I said yes to one of these, he's not in it a lot, but he's really going to impact the story parts, which is true, and it happens. And I'm not trying to discourage anyone from, getting in how you can, please. But I had sort of done it on the same level for such a long time. I literally walked into the business like fourth on the pilot in 2001, like fourth, fifth, and 9/11 happened and I got fired from the job. But basically, like, they dropped I had 2 lines and then it just progressively went away. But my point is, I kept saying yes to things that were seemingly like pushing the story along, but not, I was grateful, but I wasn't fulfilled. And understanding the difference. Grateful for the work, but not fulfilled by the work. And so once True Detective came along and Moonlight had already happened, they had approached me about playing the supporting cop in True Detective. And here it is. I'm like, I got a mother effing Oscar, and I'm like still getting it. And I had never been the lead of anything at that point, And so when I read it, and the supporting character was cool, but they're always cool. The supporting is always cool, but you're like, oh, I really want to do that though, and I want the responsibility. I want to know the responsibility of carrying a story and having to connect all these dots, because clearly you're shooting. Your first day you're shooting the middle of the pilot. The second day you're shooting the beginning. Third day you're shooting the last. So I wanted that experience, and so I left that meeting. Well, before I left the meeting, I said, "Listen, I appreciate the offer, but I want to play the lead, bro." And I told him a story about my grandfather, my mom's dad, who was a California State Police officer, late 50s, 60s, 70s, and a military guy as well. And the story was taking place in 1979 at the time it was starting in. And I felt like you kind of get positioned as the supporting cop because there almost isn't the imagery for people to know that you were a real cop in 1977, but a state police officer, right? Like not knowing that you, like, yeah, we put a black person in there, put so-and-so there, but not actually going like, oh, so-and-so, there were really black police officers in the 60s or 70s that were state police officers, right? And so I went back and I dug up some photos of my grandfather and I sent him, the day I left the meeting, I sent him a few pictures of my grandfather in his police officer uniform. And I said to him at that time, because I knew this could scare a non-black writer, I said, listen, I would like to play the lead. I sent the pictures and I said, I don't think that this necessarily means you have to go back through your script and suddenly emphasize the things on race. But I said to him, what I think would be interesting is to write it in a way that is more in alignment with how race and racism is more experiential. And what I mean by that is, and I gave him an example, I said, we're knocking on the door of a suspect or just seeking information. We knock on the door and the suspect opens the door. I'm the lead cop on it, but the suspect addresses my partner and directs all of the authority, is giving the authority to my partner just energetically. I was like, it needs to be written and directed that way. It ain't through calling people the N-word. Of course, that happens. But like, that ain't where it's at. It's more in like, in the struggle that my character is having, getting the information from somebody who's looking at me like, you ain't got no power over me, kind of thing. Right, that energy, right? And so I actually think that was exciting for him. And he felt challenged by it. And it ended up being the most difficult experience by far that I've ever had. But for me, by far the most rewarding on a certain level.
I just want to say, like, that is just freaking powerful. That is a powerful story in general, and I'm also going to claim it that is particularly powerful in this room, because we are a studio where we have a lot of people exist at intersections of gender, of sexuality. Some of us don't see ourselves on that screen that often, right? Yeah. And so that's just so amazing in terms of to just hear someone making success like that in terms of, advocating for yourself to be seen in what was assumed to be a different perspective on it. So, yeah. Y'all, I'm like, I don't even know what to say.
Well, let me say one thing about that, though. I want to encourage you that, and she can, I've known her in her entire life, so therefore she's known me pretty long. She could attest that I say this to truly encourage you because, and I'm not doing this, but I've always been that way. And one of the things my grandmother told me, she always told me, who I'm still close to and is still fortunately with us, but the worst they could do is say no. And I can't tell you how much that plays in my head and how, it has not happened yet, but I pitched Marvel on Blade. Like, I went to them and said, like, yo, so I said, I would love to play Blade, and I appreciate Wesley and his work and whatnot. I give you that bit. Like, even going back to, if we have time, I'll tell you a quick story. Grad school, I was in my third year, and I was up for The Great White Hope, which is just a play by Harold Sackler based on Jack Johnson, the first Black heavyweight champ of the world. And I was at NYU, it was my third year. It's probably April, and they're doing it for the 50th anniversary of the theater and like the 33rd anniversary of the play or something like that. James Earl Jones did it, and with Jane Alexander. And they went on to take it from Arena Stage, where we were doing it at, to Broadway, to then they did a film afterwards and nominations, all that kind of stuff. It's clearly a long time. But it was such a huge deal for me in my third year, coming out of school, and I would call myself late to acting. I really didn't start until right before grad school, really. And so I had gone up to Arena Stage and I did the audition. And this is third year. A year earlier, I was about to quit acting, but I had a great summer at the Guthrie. I learned quite a bit, and I ended up having a good third year. So I go out there for this audition. I have the audition. I feel great about the audition. I come back to school, and all my classmates, there's like 18 of us total. They're kind of like looking at me and questioning how to go. And like, you know, when you're kind of like waiting to hear back on an audition. So like, you don't know what to say and you don't know how it's going to go. So a week passed and I was feeling a kind of way. And so I remember I called the casting director and I had said, I'm not encouraging you to do this. But I called the casting director. I feel like his name was Mark or David or something. And I called him and I said, hey Mark, it's Mahershala.
Or David.
Yeah, I was like, hey Mark or David, it's Mahershala. And he was like, hey Mahershala, how you doing? I said, well, look, man, I've just given you a ring. I just wanted to let you know that I'm gonna have to pull myself out of, whatever contention for this part. And he was like, oh, why? I was like, well, I got this other job. I got to take this other job that's coming. Like, I think I have this other opportunity and I think I'm going to roll with it. And he's like, well, hold on. Let me call you back. So he called me back. I got the job. My point is that in terms of if you've committed yourself to a path, right, and you believe in yourself, clearly keep it within certain boundaries. But I say that only to say, like, yes, I did asked about Blade in 2018 or 19, but I'm just saying that back when you're at a place where you don't feel like you have the allies that you want and the power that you want right now, I'm telling you, your belief is everything. Mm-hmm. Your belief is everything. And clearly keep everything within reason, but allow your belief and your faith in your process and in your discovery and in your training and in the work you're putting in. Allow that to infuse you with courage to continue to move forward in doing what you need to do to make the progress you need to make as an artist, and both an artist and a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about that, yes. And it may be a stupid question, so I'm the interviewer asking a stupid question. But I see this sometimes. I'm translating through the perspective of the students because you're saying purpose, right, and intentionality. And I guess my question is, do you have any advice to say, when you are not seeing yourself on screen, or and so you have inherently a larger sort of purpose for your work, right? Mm-hmm. How then, based off of the work that we do, where it's like, how do you do that? Release that, walk into the space, be free, be open. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes that sort of purpose and that desire, sometimes it then makes me get tense as a human being, right? Yeah. So I don't know if that's something that you've had to navigate, because it's great to have that purpose, and what's so confounding about this industry that we're in is that, that purpose drives you there. And then you have to get there. One of the things that you said to me in our first conversation when you were talking about Rami and doing Saturday Night Live was just sort of like how he was just living so comfortably in his body. Yeah. And so how do we sort of transition, if you have any sort of advice or thoughts on that, how you deal with it?
Well, in that case, so for Rami, I would think of SNL being the whale. And if he's tasked with eating that whole well, he's just got to breathe through it, right? So one breath at a time. Mm. And I think when we enter these spaces and the whale is the job or the life-changing opportunity or what have you, that I don't think we can go in there experiencing that like, this is so big. This is so big. This is so amazing. I think we just got to be like, every breath is an opportunity. Every breath is an opportunity for gratitude and presence. And think about it. When do you, like in Buddhism and even yoga, they talk about coming back to center, right? I think that's the breath is, right? It's just, I need to center myself. I need to center myself. And so whatever the task, firefighter or painter, like I have to center myself. I have to be breathing through this to make my breakfast or to climb this mountain that as centered as I can be, as I can make it. Breathing is as simple as I can make it for myself.
Because to me, this kind of connects to one of the things that you said, that in shooting Moonlight, you said that all the things that were going on around the set, like what they were doing, I think for, a lot of people going into that space, then that sort of like activity may throw you off. But you said something, I didn't quite understand it. So I just wanted that you figured out a way for that to help you in the work.
Well, Moonlight was interesting because it was.
You said you were dancing with the DP. I think that was the phrase.
Yeah. And specifically during that opening shot of the film.
Yeah. I remember it.
Oh, man. That was. I missed that. Okay. So, when you're acting, when you're shooting, you are the eye of the storm. You are in it. You are it. Everything else, all of that, but you get to, you accept that, embrace it, and you see it till you don't see it. Like you allow it to fade away and sort of be in this precious vortex in the middle of camera moving and people whispering, somebody checking their phone, and somebody doing something else. It's just finding a way to be so committed and immersed in that moment that just like fades away, because the most important thing you're doing is a thing you're doing in the moment. And so I think that's how it could kind of fall away. And I think in that chaos, it could become very peaceful, while you're navigating that 30 seconds or that 2 minutes or whatever it is, that is just you leaning on each other and trying to discover how to like get through the scene. Like there can be a real joy in that climb together.
Awesome. Gabby, should we go to some of the student questions?
Yes.
Who is going first?
Brendan, just a little bit about process, which we talked about.
What's your?
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Brendan.
So we had an opportunity to submit questions. So I was thinking, and you mentioned something earlier about 2001, right? There was a moment where you lost work.
Yeah.
In those stages of your craft, was there something that you've learned up to that point that you still do today in terms of dissecting scene, in terms of dissecting character, or did you have to adjust and amplify it in terms of being able to then accept some of the bigger roles or the bigger opportunities?
I'm going to just repeat it back so that people, and tell me if I'm misstating you. As his work changed, were there adjustments or change to his process?
To the process, absolutely. Was there that moment where you had to sit there and say, I need to invest harder. I need to commit harder. I'm not doing enough. Or, I think there's a difference between shallow choices and deeper choices. Do I need to change my process in order to investigate these deeper choices?
That's a good question. Because part of me wants to say something. I'm a little afraid of how it would be interpreted, but part of me really wants to say I chose to do less. And because, man, acting is amazing. And I want to answer this question. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how to answer it and share it. I think, yes, there's scripts, there's terrific writers, there's wonderful directors, but then there's also coming to the table with a muscular ability to observe life. And so I don't know if that happens by signing up for the extra class, and I'm not telling you to stop the class you're in. I don't mean that. But I do I do think it's like about not working as hard and sort of learning to discover the work.
Mm.
And so I did Green Book and True Detective 2 weeks apart. And so I finished working on Green Book around like, I don't know, like December or something like that. And then I think like 2 weeks later, I started shooting. I had to go to be in Fayetteville and started shooting True Detective. Now, True Detective was 3 different eras. Like, you know, I'm playing like 35, I don't remember, 45 and like 75 or something like that. So I had auditioned with a few people, say in like the summer of like 17, just to sort of help cast it. Cause then I have to go away, shoot Green Book, and then we were gonna start shooting True Detective. So I remember doing some work with some people in the read through of just like reading scenes. And then we cast Carmen and Jogo, and then I went away. And they kept working on it, but I didn't have the capacity or time to be invested because I'm shooting my first closest thing to a lead ever with Vigo. And we're working every day. I was absolutely exhausted, and that part was totally full time. Mm-hmm. And the moment I finish, I was so excited, and my child's not even a year yet. My family needs some time. And I knew True Detective was coming up, but had felt like he was in me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to trust it. Like, I just wanted to trust it. And so I knew I had touched on him a few months earlier, just in the audition process, and I had some general ideas. But I'm just trying to say that I did a lot less for the thing that I'm probably proudest of. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't about like reading every book on state police officers and like, which is great if that's how you relate to it. But I was like, I need to get less academic because I need to inform myself with having a clear, like a knowledge of this character, but almost I just need these tools and that they'll trigger things along the way and you just trust it. So I think in a very long-winded way of answering your question, I think it's learning to be more studious in life or to be more observant in life and that be just your natural way of functioning. And then it just so happens to come out when you're acting.
So that, and tell me if this does it.
I don't know if that's helpful, but that's my call.
Tell me if this, if you disagree with it, is it, can you say that, you know, as you've gotten older, you've been able to trust your process, the subconscious aspect of your process more without directly being like, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to hit this or those things and just trust that it's coming into you?
Yes, but what's strange is that I'm equally terrified though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so trust is a...
Yeah, so yeah, I do trust my process more, but I'm still terrified.
Great. And then I want to also put that with, because I love it and that totally makes sense to me. But then you said with Don Shirley that Don Shirley speaks from the heart space.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's what it. So then do you ever do that sort of conscious investigation of like, this character speaks from the heart, this character speaks from the groin? Or is it, how does it, you know, how did it manifest itself?
So I think it could be, we're years out of that, but I think in the moment and trying to discover where a character lives, it is taking like every skill that you've worked on or taught or been taught and knowing that it lives in you, but just in the moment finding out how to apply that knowledge, what have you. And so we could be working on a scene. This right now could be, you know, what I know of Don Shirley. I'm just looking at all these clues and how are these clues going to inform my behavior, right? To where they become sort of a state of being. So I might think, well, he may sit a little more just how I might be working to discover how he is in his body, right? I might try to receive information from a certain place in my body, right? Or I may put my ears here. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So it's like when I know we're working on that scene, but like, I don't need to hear that here. Like, I need to hear that here, right? And so it's like right now, it's like we're talking about color. Like, how do you describe color? Those are hard things to describe, but I think that they are things that you begin to understand for yourself. And I might use a word that is different from the word that you use. Do you know what I mean? And so,
because to me, what I'm hearing is that, you know, you sort of really trusting that you're going to walk in, and it feels like you walk in human first, meaning that I'm a human being with all the essences of my humanity. And whereas, you know, speaking, you know, as actors, you know, sometimes we're so easy to toss that out. Like, let me play these words.
You start with the layers. The mistake is, I think, is starting with the idea of the character and how he's talking and how he's, you know, whatever. And then eventually you'll discover yourself at some point, or discover what you are personally bringing to it. When I think if you could show up at the beginning of the process and hold yourself responsible to making that character specific, right? Because there's different types of actors. There's different goals with storytelling, or the manner in which, or the style in which people want to tell stories. I know what sort of my goals are, and no, I don't always hit it per se, but my goal is to be transformational, right? And to have a mosaic of work, all these different tiles that feel unique and different. You pull back and you see a larger picture of somebody's like choices, right? But even though you kind of begin with yourself, because you are you coming to this part, that you have to have foundationally. But I think like the people that I think we probably quietly love or whatever, or start thinking about your personal goats and all the people you responded to. My favorite are like the ones that are really different in one thing, they're different in another thing, and you always tend to believe them, you know. And that's like a elite level work. And I'm like, I have always been in awe of people who can find that. And the key to that, part of that is, and we don't live in an era that supports or necessarily truly respects time between parts. So people work so much, and especially, it ain't even about money. Like, they're just operating, yes. And then it's just like character bleed. And then it becomes, oh, you got isms, right? And then so-and-so has their isms, right? And it's not because they're not talented. It's just like now they're working too much. And so they don't have the time between to really look at like how this character is different. Not even just different from the last one they played. Forget the last one you played. Who is this person? And you don't have it's not even about like, let me work on my speech and dialect and yoga and lose 30 pounds, gain 30 pounds. It's not even about that. It's about having the time to almost mourn the last experience and allow that character to die, so that then you can be experiencing some things and step into a new one with new skin, with new things to learn and new things to offer, right? But you haven't even had a chance to take in the lessons of your last part, right? Because, and the great thing about theater, for instance, it works slower in a certain way. So your build with it is like really like incremental. It's like really slow, and it's not working for a long time. And then suddenly it works. And if you're in school, you're like, you get to do 3 shows. Great. And then it's like, you're back to studying something else for a few weeks. And then you get recast and new stuff. And then you start another 5-week build to like opening something else. So you have a different type of time. Film and TV, like, you know, whoever. And I know Michael B's showing up for something, he's shooting something. And then the next day he's got like 3 other things to do, right? And so there becomes the era that we live in, and that's all due respect to Michael B. So please don't misinterpret that comment at all. But I think we live in a time that if you have a modicum of success, there becomes this responsibility to monetize it and to grow it and stretch it out, right? And so then people just start trying to figure out ways to make this moment expand. When I think we have to, in some ways, just encourage ourselves and have some trust around, I think, working a little slower. A lot of people say don't listen to him, but that's.
I want to change this to life lessons.
Yes,
because this is just beautiful and generous.
Yeah.
Can we take one more student question?
Of course.
Gabby.
Deja.
I guess it's kind of twofold.
Yeah.
I was curious, as a creative and an artist, if you had like a super low point, whatever that was, and how you came out of it. And also, whether this was after school or before school, I don't really know where you came from before school, but like how you just stayed afloat during these dry periods and things.
Just so people know, we're asking, as a creative, were there sort of low points, and how did he maintain and feed himself during that time?
Yeah. You know, Simone and I were just talking about this like yesterday, and I've had a few for sure. I've had a few, and some had been harder than others, and for different reasons. And really, man, I've had a few. You know, some can be hard because, and they're different, because like one could be about 29 through 2012. Like I've always basically worked. There was like one little like quiet period up around the earlier strike, the 2009-ish one or whatever. And that got really hard. And I think it's hard because when you're not working and you're broke, because you could be at a certain place where you've made a decent amount of money, so you may not work for a year or two, but like you're doing okay and like residuals are coming in. Like it's a different experience. But the pain of not paying bills, losing stuff.
And also, I want to say that feeding yourself, I said that, but it's also artistically, metaphorically, all those things.
Yes. And the pattern and rhythm of working. See, part of like when I got into it, I got into somewhat of a rhythm of working, booking a pilot and working on a show. This one did 2 years, this one does a year, this one does this. So once that rhythm gets broken, and if you are one to, in some ways, align your identity with your profession, once you're not able to express or participate in your profession, then you begin to question your value. And all that is like really, it's dangerous territory, you know? And so I guess to begin to answer your question, the most basic place I have to start from is a place of like prayer and meditation. And so that's how I've survived. Is really through that, and me having a source and a place to go to, because I so often I find myself experiencing situations that are larger than me. Like we've all just had our our second act of God situation recently. It's like the strike, right? But then we had like a 2-year funny pocket with COVID. And these things have brought up so much for people emotionally, because one of the things we want in life is to feel like life is moving forward, that things are growing and expanding. We're cool if it doesn't feel like it's growing for a minute. We can kick it. All right, cool. We're learning some stuff. But then at a certain point, it's kind of like, all right, I'm uncomfortable with feeling stagnant right now. And then things begin to set in. So I think in terms of tools, however you can relate to and articulate your relationship with spirit, like something bigger than you, outside of you, to find yourself in the flow of life, in the flow of nature, in the flow of energy. I encourage you to commit to doing those things. I think it's important to create like a rhythm for yourself, to be conscious when it's like, well, I've been sitting around for 3 straight days. There's a reason why I'm feeling like depressed. I need to get outside. I need to get some light. I need to get on this bike today, or I need to go for a walk. I need to do the things. I need to clean my space. I need to clean my space. I got to organize my space. I work so much better when my space is clean, right? I need to know where things are, right? And so there's little things that you can do and you can be consistent about to sort of almost like water your self-esteem. And I think as you do those things, I think it will allow you and give you the perspective it is sort of like wake your eyes up to the other things to be grateful for, and to sort of be in breathing in those gifts and breathing out like a good word, breathing out like positivity, where you can sort of like shift the energy. It's like, that's my belief. But I do think that is a muscle. Like, I do think we have to learn how to patiently navigate those waters. We have to learn how to navigate that weather, right? And become, as best we can, become an expert at it. Because we've all been touched by difficulty, I imagine, wherever you come from. I imagine we've all in some capacity been touched by trauma or loss or what have you. And to live is to experience that whole wide range of things. It doesn't mean we have to experience it and go to a place where we lack health or for very long, So I hope that was helpful. I said a lot.
Yeah.
All right.
So keep an eye on time, and I wish that we had more time. I just have one final question.
Yes.
You bring it a little bit to career. So you said that Moonlight, you fell in love with it the moment you read it.
Yeah.
Well, you said, I think you said that the script came across your desk,
Yeah.
right? How do we get one of those desks? What I want to know, what is this? But specifically, if there's anything else you could share about, what made you, you said you recognized what that was from the moment you read it.
Okay, so that it ties a little bit into sort of what I was just saying. And that at that time in my life, and I think this connects, but this is how I want to answer that question. So I was in my 3rd season of House of Cards, and it was a hit show, and it started the binging thing. It was Netflix's first show. And I was asking to get off the show. And like people were like, what are you doing? What do you mean get off the show? I'd done 2 seasons and I was really kind of begging, like, can I get off the show? And I had to explain myself a bit, but I just didn't want to be another dude on a show. And I knew that they weren't going to write for me at that point. Like, it wasn't going to grow. So it was kind of a diminishing returns thing. And then at a certain point, you're Remy walking down the street, yo, Remy. And like, that's death. Because like, and then you're like a dude, and I didn't want that. And so the work and the conversations and the faith and working to unplug from that show and get off. So the deal was the 4th season, would you be a guest star? Well, you could work as a guest star. And again, I didn't, it's all complicated, but I didn't make money on that show in a real way. So when I finally got paid, it was or some version of getting paid, it was almost to go away. Like almost like now you make a little bit, but it's for a few episodes and we're writing you out, right? It's like 4 left. I was like, all right, cool, whatever. Like, that's what it is. And so, but the minute I got out of that contract, I got a phone call about Luke Cage and which I was like, I'm not trying to do it on TV. They're like, he dies. I'm like, cool. But there were like 3 or 4 things that came at like one time. And Moonlight showed up. And so part of why I was begging to get out of House of Cards was I was in a 7/13 contract. So like technically I had to get paid for 7 episodes or whatever. They didn't have to be in 7, but they had to pay me for 7, right? So I didn't know what the schedule was going to be. So if we start shooting in, and each year would be different depending on what Kevin's schedule was. So if we are starting to shoot April 1st, technically, if I got a job offer and it started shooting in March or February, if that show or film is going to bleed into the House of Cards season, they don't even know if they're going to use me yet. They might not use me until episode 5, right? But they're like, no, he's booked. So I'm basically owned for like 8 months on the calendar year. And I'm filming 1 day a month, 2 days a month, 3 or 4 scenes real quick. Maybe they matter, maybe they don't. And so here I'm looking at my trajectory as an actor and not even being able to truly capitalize on this moment of the show that is like doing its thing. And I'm basically unavailable. And so I fought to get available. And in fighting to get available, even though the comfortable thing was to like just keep getting a check, having just lost my house a few years earlier from the strike, not working. And like, this is 2010-ish or whatever, 2012 when I'm shooting it. But I think I even lost answering the question, but it
came across your desk.
It came across. It came, and I think it came. But I'm saying, I don't know if that happens if you don't make other choices. Is why I'm saying that, because I wouldn't have been available. If I hadn't fought to get off the show, I couldn't have done it anyway, because I would have been on the schedule. So once I was like, they were like, oh, he doesn't have a job. We got to work for him in a certain way. That I remember I was walking in the hallway of my agent, like, hey, Marshall, there's a script you got to read. Moonlight, you got to, yeah, all right, cool. And then someone else told me about it, and I read it, and I was like, yo, this is the best thing I've ever read in my life. I like wept. Like as soon as I was done, I wept. And I ended up talking to Barry Jenkins, who knew me from House of Cards, and that was why I potentially wasn't going to get it. He just saw me as being square, right? Like as being, that character. And the funny thing is, it was kind of like the last thing where I was like, all right, I'll do it. I did this movie Kicks, and I'm in it. I got like 2 scenes, and I did it because it was in the Bay, and I'm from the Bay, and I hadn't shot anything, and I liked the script, and I liked Justin, the director, Justin Tipping. I just met him, and I was like, yo, this dude is so different. I was like, he's so different from anything I've ever got to play, and I've been wanting to kind of do something that just felt just not so just magical unicorn black man kind of thing, just something like just a little bit more grounded and down home. And so I got to play this character Juan, and there was a producer on Kicks, Adela Romansky, showed Barry those scenes, and that's how I got Juan. But so I think you're always moving. Like I'm still living life. Like hopefully I'm not done. I'm still working towards whatever my story's still working out. Like I'm still working on it. I'm still moving. But I do think that if we do our best to practice honesty and really work to listen to our barometer and watch for our life signs in the way in which life speaks to you, that you have a relationship with and a pattern for seeing the things that you see in the world, I think the better you get at listening to that, I think that's when sort of I think the miracle can happen quicker. Like the things that you want to get to that open things up for you for some time, to push you along. The raft you need to get you to the island, to get the boat, to get to the land, to get to the car, to get to the house, to get like that's the process, a little bit. And so that's why I told that whole roundabout story, because I think that is part of it, like helping yourself so that you can be helped, and being honest about what you want. And
so it's not just
be
about
open to the consequences. And that's what keeps people from going for what they want, is they're worried about the consequences of what they want, and so it's like you got to realize you can't have it both ways. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So we are out of time, and I just want to, I think the words are, man, like, thank you for coming in and just elevating our space.
Yeah.
I wish y'all the best. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Beautiful work. I wish you the best on your journey, and I hope we get to work together one day.
Yeah. So guys, I have a couple things I have to say. We started unexpectedly, and so of course y'all know this is the Last Acting Studio. You can always go to the lastactingstudio.com. And I want to talk about the space that we're in. We are at the Outside In Theater. It's a new theater in Highland Park, where they are, just doing exciting things, playing with the boundaries of digital and theater, and hence why we are in the space and we're able to live stream this so easily. And I want to really hype this up because my friend Casey Rogers has the first play that is going to be here, and it opens on May 25th. Yeah, we can clap. A lot of us know Casey, and so her play opens on May 25th. Tickets will go on sale this weekend. And it's called I Sell Windows, and it's by Casey Rogers, who is the amazing actor and writer. So y'all, thank y'all for joining us, and we'll hopefully see y'all soon.